So that is the temperament. But to come back to this, I never thought in my wildest dreams that this would happen to me. But the current issue of High Times magazine, June of 2010, I bought this yesterday, on page 84. My kids are amazed. Here I am, okay? Cheech and Chong on the cover, Judge Gray inside. So I have some strange bedfellows. But I have met, I'm proud to say, some of the finest people in my life that I have met as a result of drug policy reform. Some of them have been to prison. Some of them are addicted to drugs. A lot of them are like me, that have never used any form of illicit drug, but they just see what's going on, and they just are determined to speak up and change away from this failed policy. Where do we go from here? Because I don't need to convert you. I fully anticipate that you are in favor of change as well. But we have to realize, and in fact in my first book, Why Our Drug Laws Have Failed, the first half of the book should really make you mad. No, it cites all of the harms that we have inflicted unnecessarily upon ourselves. Loss of civil liberties, we have lost more of our civil liberties protections because of the war on drugs than anything in our history. Lack of medical care for people that are using drugs, you know. I've never in my life heard anyone say being addicted to heroin is a good thing. You haven't heard that either. Everybody knows it's harmful. But even if you are addicted to heroin, why should you get AIDS also? Why should you get hepatitis C? No, these are easy issues to address. And if you talk with a heroin-addicted person, he or she will tell you almost all the time that it's easier for them to get their heroin than it is a clean needle. Isn't that stupid? I mean, isn't that a crime? You want to hear a crime? Let me explain something to you. In the early to middle 1980s, Holland, who has about as much tolerance for using drugs as we do, but they see that the drugs are here to stay. They recognize the reality, which is there's never been a society in the history of mankind that has not had some form of mind-altering, sometimes addicting substance to use, to misuse, to abuse, or even get addicted to, except maybe the Eskimos, because they couldn't grow anything, but now chemistry has changed that as well. So let's recognize that fact and stop moralizing about these issues and start acting as managers. And so they did. And now in Holland, and for the last number of decades, you or I or anybody 16 years of age or older can go to a coffee house. And you can get coffee and tea and sandwiches. You also can get marijuana and hashish. Okay? The Minister of Health of Holland held a press conference, I cite it in my book, saying we in our country have only half the marijuana consumption in our country as you do per capita in the United States of America, both for adults and for teenagers. Hear that again? Both for adults and for teenagers. And he went on to explain why. You know what he said? We have succeeded in making pot boring. There's a message there. Because we glamorize it by making it illegal, and we also have an absolutely obscene profit motive to get people to sell marijuana or any other drug, by the way, to you, your neighbors, our children, etc. We can learn from that. But again, Holland understands the drugs are here to stay, understands that under some circumstances the drugs can be harmful in our society. So if the harms are here, let's have a whole universal policy to reduce the harms that can and will be caused by the presence of these drugs in our communities. So they've entitled their whole program Harm Reduction. Doesn't that make sense? Doesn't that make sense? So they looked in their country of the early 1980s, and they found that 8% of their people that were using illegal injecting drugs were HIV positive. They had the AIDS virus, and they decided, you know something? That's too much. We can do better than that. So they put in a program of needle exchange. You should know what this is. It's the most elementary medicalization program that pretty much anyone could come up with. Anyone can exchange a dirty needle for a clean one. No money changes hands. No questions are asked, period. They found, after about 8 or 9 years, that they had reduced the number of people, the percentage of illegal injecting drug users that had the AIDS virus, from 8% to 4%. And that is completely consistent with pretty much every neutral study that's ever addressed this issue. They say, University of California, Princeton, Centers for Disease Control, they all have these studies, and they say needle exchange programs do not increase drug usage. They don't decrease it either. They're pretty much neutral, but they do decrease the incidence of blood-borne diseases by 50%. You want to know why I'm so active in trying to change our nation's drug policy? Do you know what the percent is in the United States of America of people that use illegal injecting drugs that has the AIDS virus? 35%. 35%. That is a crime that we are inflicting upon our own people. Today, in this state of California, it is illegal for anyone without a doctor's prescription to have a hypodermic needle and syringe. And it is illegal for a doctor to prescribe a hypodermic needle and syringe for people that are using illegal injecting drugs. So if you're using insulin or these various other drugs, yes, you can have one, but otherwise it's in the California Business and Professions Code, and I have to enforce this, and I have actually sentenced people to jail, not volitionally, but for having possession of a hypodermic needle and syringe. Basically, it was always credit for time served, but I have to follow the law. I'm a judge. Whether I agree with the law or not, by my oath of office, I have to follow it. I don't have to do so quietly, but I do. But isn't this stupid? But there's always the argument. You'll hear it. You have heard it. Needle exchange programs? Oh, no, we can't do that. Why? Well, not only is the government condoning this, and the government's part of, in effect, encouraging illegal drug usage, which is downright silly, but then they'll give you that knockout blow, at least so-called. And that is, oh, but you're sending the wrong message to our children. And I'll ask you. You've heard that before. What's the right message? Because the message we're really sending today is, go ahead and die. We could save you. We could help you. But you fail our drug morality test, so we're not going to do it. What kind of a message is that? So I say instead, don't hide programs like this from our children. Take them there. Let these children speak with these drug-addicted or even drug-using people. What do you think they're going to tell them? Oh yeah, follow my lead? You want to look at me? I'm 42. I look like I'm 60. What they're really going to tell them is, you know how I got started on this? Somebody gave me a free sample. I thought it was cool. I went to a party. Whatever their stories would be, and it's the worst decision I ever made. That would be honest education that these people are going to tell to our children. Let's be honest. Let's also be honest with regard to these drugs. There are benefits for taking any of these drugs, aren't there? There have to be by definition, because if there were no benefits, people wouldn't take them. So let's engage in a cost-benefit, risk-benefit analysis. And let's talk about it openly. Let's bring in people. Hey, I've experienced that rush from heroin, whatever it is, and let them weigh that rush for half an hour or whatever it is against all of the downsides. Let's talk about that. That's why the DARE program was so thoroughly unsuccessful. Because you guys probably know more about. How many of you have been involved with the DARE program? Pretty much everybody. How many of you think it was helpful? Okay. A lot of ways it glamorized all this stuff, but if you had somebody, a police officer is not the right person to teach this program. It just isn't. Bring in a healthcare person, bring in a recovering addict, whatever. But even if the police officer has used any of these drugs, and they probably have at one time or another, they can't talk about it, which is dumb. So I understand from Brett, everybody in this room was really screened. It's some of the more intelligent peoples in the Whittier Law School community before you could even be here. And he's boasting about you to me. Kind of. So, we are going to establish a new drug policy right here and right now. And what's the first question we should ask?